तब भी मैंने ये कहा था कि इसमें किसी भी फिल्म को उसका विरोध हम तुरंत नहीं करते हैं, हम उस फिल्म को देखेंगे तब उसका विरोध हम करेंगे। लेकिन इस समय जो कुछ भी हम सुनने को हमें मिल रहा है वो ठीक नहीं है, और निश्चित तौर पर आदिपुरुष फिल्म ने हिंदू जनमानस के कहीं न कहीं मनों को ठेस पहुंचाई है।
Hello and welcome to Vantage USA. We are coming to you live from Washington, D.C. It's a city steeped in history and politics. Wars have started and ended here. Alliances have been forged and relationships built. Now it's ready for the next chapter. Prime Minister Narendra Modi will be landing here on the 21st of June. That's Wednesday. You can almost feel the buzz around here. It's a feeling that has disappeared from diplomacy nowadays. Years ago, the whole city would mobilize to welcome world leaders. There would be long preparations, flags all around, even people lining up on the streets, like they would for celebrities. You don't see that sort of welcome nowadays, but this visit by Prime Minister Modi seems to be an exception. There is genuine excitement in the air, and we will tell you why. From symbolism to substance to strategy, we will decode all of it. What's on the agenda? What are the expectations? What is the word on the streets of Washington? We'll talk about all of that. But first, the headlines. Tensions soar in the West Bank. Israel deploys attack helicopters in a raid in the Jenin refugee camp. At least 4 Palestinians have been killed, over 40 injured. Israeli personnel also wounded. Israel says the operation was to arrest quote-unquote wanted suspects. Pro-Khalistan extremist shot dead in Canada. Hardeep Singh Nijjar, a pro-Khalistan leader, was killed in a targeted shooting in Surrey. The Indian government had declared Nijjar a wanted terrorist. European Union and Kenya sign a major trade deal which will boost the EU's economic ties with Africa as it looks to counter China in the region. The deal will allow Kenya duty-free access to the EU, which is its biggest market. Pakistan arrests over 10 human traffickers for the Greece migrant boat tragedy. Last week, an overloaded boat carrying around 750 people sank off Greece. More than 300 Pakistanis are feared dead. Islamabad declared Monday as a day of mourning. North Korea calls the bot spy satellite launch its gravest failure. Top officials promised to push for a second attempt. On the 31st of May, North Korea's first military spy satellite crashed soon after liftoff. And Europe is the world's fastest warming continent. It should brace for more deadly heat waves, says a climate report. Europe witnessed its warmest summer on record last year. Prime Minister Narendra Modi is not a new face in Washington, D.C. He's been here before, but this time the stakes are higher. There is a war in Europe. There is a Cold War in Asia, and for both, the U.S. needs Indian support. So Joe Biden is looking ahead. He wants to write a new chapter in India-US relations. Will India play along? Let me take you back 7 years. It was another June in Washington, D.C. Prime Minister Modi was addressing the U.S. Congress. Something he said then stood out. Listen to this.
Today, our relationship has overcome the hesitations of history.
Today, our relationship has overcome the hesitations of history, he said. It was a very important statement. India and the US were effectively on the opposing sides during the Cold War. That hangover continued even after 1991. Thus, the hesitation. But in 2016, India declared that those hesitations are over. So this visit is about the next step, about trust and commitment, which is why the Prime Minister is traveling all the way to Washington, which is why Biden has pulled out his biggest red carpet to take this relationship to the next stage. Ask any strategic expert, and this is what they'll tell you. India and the US are natural partners, two vibrant democracies, two diverse societies, and two ambitious polities. Yes, differences exist, but it remains one of the most consequential relationships of our times, which brings us to the visit. Let's start with Prime Minister Modi's schedule. His first stop is not Washington, it's New York. On the 21st of June, he will be at the United Nations headquarters. It's International Yoga Day, so the Prime Minister will lead the celebrations. And the next day is crucial, the business day, as we call it. First, there will be a ceremonial welcome at the White House, right behind me, followed by the big bilateral talks. After meeting Biden, the Prime Minister will head to the US Congress. He will address American lawmakers for the second time. The first was in 2016. In the evening, he will return to the White House. President Biden and the First Lady will be hosting a state dinner. It's an event made for the cameras. On the 23rd of June, there is more business. The Prime Minister will have lunch with Vice President Kamala Harris and US Secretary of State Antony Blinken. He will also meet top corporate leaders and the Indian diaspora. So that is the schedule. But what is expected from these engagements? We can divide those in three broad parts. First is symbolism. A state visit and a dinner is a very big deal here. It's reserved for special guests. Biden has hosted just 2 state dinners so far as president. One for French President Macron and the second for the South Korean president. You know how you save your best perfume for the best occasion? This is the diplomatic equivalent. The second part is the agenda. Talks are expected to cover a lot of issues like defense, energy, trade, China, and the Indo-Pacific. The Ukraine war, of course, will also be discussed. It is no secret that Biden would love India to toughen its position. Also, the G20. India will be hosting the Leaders Summit in September this year, the G20 Leaders Summit. America's support will be key to getting a joint statement out. Remember, Russia and China will also be there. They're also members of the G20. So consensus will be tough. Both sides will also be looking for more political impetus. You see, there's a limit to what bureaucrats can achieve, or even diplomats. In the end, you need the leadership. You need the Prime Minister and the President to ease things out, to solve the big knots. Biden and Modi will look to do that, to inject more momentum into this relationship. Which brings us to the third part, the deliverables. Defense seems to be the top priority at this point. At least 2 deals are expected either to be announced or to be signed. One is, of course, to manufacture jet engines in India. We've been talking about that on the show. The second is for India to buy Predator drones from the US, around 30 drones for $3 billion. And both these deals are significant. The US has historically refused to transfer critical technology to India, and jet engine is one such critical technology. Reports say General Electric will sign a deal with Hindustan Aeronauticals Limited, HAL. We don't know the shape or the form of that deal, but Biden and Modi cannot stop at these. They should push on. Expanding defense manufacturing is good for both sides. The US can diversify its supply chains, and India, of course, gets more investments and jobs, not to mention a new source of weapons other than Russia. Like I said, the hesitancy is over. It's all about building trust and commitment. And defense is a good indicator of that. In 2008, India barely had any defense trade with the Americans. Now it's more than $20 billion. The overall trade, $190 billion, which makes the United States of America India's largest trading partner. So there's a lot in common, a lot going for both sides. There's a lot of potential. But, as always, there are challenges as well. One thing is clear, though. Joe Biden is betting big on this visit. Like all relationships, there is something in it for both sides. But one party seems to be more eager, and that is the American side. That's US President Joe Biden. Do you remember his campaign promise in 2020? He said America is back. From the looks of it, it's back to square one. Biden's foreign policy record does not look good as of today. He failed to revive the Iran nuclear deal. He failed to stop the Ukraine war. He's also losing allies in West Asia, which makes you wonder, where are the positives? Well, this visit could be one of them. If Biden can cement the India-US relationship, his legacy would be set. Because New Delhi is a big prize, the biggest democracy in the world. A major Indian Ocean power, which is also a nuclear-armed power. A leader of the global south, a historic partner of the Russians. You can't ignore India anymore. It's the 5th largest economy in the world. It offers you supply chain diversity and skilled labor. Joe Biden wants all of that. He knows that India is key to America's eventual showdown with China, whether it's taking away the factories or producing semiconductors or patrolling the Indo-Pacific. So what does the US president do? He lays out the big red carpet. If Biden can get India on board, he can sell it to his voters. He's facing re-election next year. And from the looks of it, he will take on Donald Trump. So it will be a repeat of the 2020 election. Although a lot has changed since then, President Biden has presided over a period of rising cost of living. He's also lost the US House of Representatives. His approval rating is around 40%, which is the lowest of his presidency. And Trump, on the other hand, is in legal trouble. He has been charged in 2 separate cases. So my point is, anything can happen. It's going to be a big contest. Biden may or may not be in the White House next year, so he's pulling out all the stops. There are 2 aspects to this strategy. Number one, the Indian-American pull. It's a huge community in the US, numbering more than 4 million. They're the second largest immigrant voting bloc, and most of them support Prime Minister Modi. You court the Prime Minister, you get their vote. At least that's the assumption. Donald Trump tried the same. In 2016, he released this campaign video.
Abhi ki bar, Trump Sarkar.
That was Prime Minister Modi's 2014 election slogan. Trump copied it, and it seems to have helped. Perhaps Biden is expecting similar results this time. The second aspect is strategic. I already mentioned what India brings to the table for the Americans. Yes, the defense deals and the tech transfer is great, but for Joe Biden, that is not the end goal. The end goal for him is political, to recruit India into the American camp. And that would really help him domestically too. Just think back to another American president, Richard Nixon, known for just 2 things. One is the Watergate scandal and his disgraceful exit from the White House. The second is his China policy. Richard Nixon began relations with the communist regime in China. He opened a second front against the Soviet Union. It played a crucial role in the Cold War, perhaps even contributed to the end of the Cold War. Joe Biden is trying to do something similar as president, to use India's popularity and strategic importance to benefit domestically. The question is, will Prime Minister Modi play that game? We ask because it's a dangerous one, especially because it's targeted at one country, China. Speaking of which, Beijing is hosting a very important visitor as we speak, US Secretary of State Antony Blinken. It was a long overdue trip. The last US Secretary to visit China was Mike Pompeo. That was in 2018, so it's been 5 years. Blinken was supposed to visit in February, but that trip was postponed by the balloon saga. You may remember that story. We reported it. Chinese spy balloons were spotted over American skies. Washington shot down one of them and postponed the trip. Anyway, it's finally happening. Blinken had 3 important meetings in Beijing, with President Xi Jinping, with Foreign Minister Qin Gang, and with top diplomat Wang Yi. How did the meetings go? Well, here's what President Xi Jinping said after meeting Antony Blinken.
The 2 sides have also made progress and reached agreement on some specific issues. This is very good.
So some progress and some agreement. I guess that was expected. You see, China-US ties have hit rock bottom. So the expectations from this visit were pretty low. Blinken's mission was to keep the lines of communication open to avoid any miscalculations. But for China, the big issue was Taiwan. President Xi told Antony Blinken that relationships should be based on mutual respect and sincerity. A bit rich coming from the expansionist in chief. Either way, the visit seems to have gone by without much fuss. Way better than the shouting contest in Alaska 2 years back. But let's come back to Washington. China will be a key issue when Biden and Modi talk. The US may not say it out loud, but they're locked in a Cold War with Beijing. The White House has a 2-part strategy. One is economic warfare, all the sanctions, the tariffs, the export controls. The idea is to weaken the Chinese economically, to take factories and jobs out of China. The second strategy is military deterrence. We've seen more US activity in the Indo-Pacific. Biden has also deployed more warships and submarines in the region, so the message is quite clear. The Indo-Pacific will not be a Chinese lake. Where does India figure in that plan? New Delhi is key to both these strategies, economic and military. Again, I come back to the question, will Prime Minister Modi agree to what Biden has in mind? Well, unlike the US, India shares a border with China, a long, contested and volatile border. The 2 armies faced off in the year 2020 in Galwan, and since then there's been a standoff. 38 months and no sign of de-escalation. We've been locked in a standoff with the Chinese for 38 months. Thousands of soldiers have been deployed on either side. Even a small miscalculation can be deadly. And Prime Minister Modi cannot ignore this border issue. He cannot push China beyond a point. The US, on the other hand, faces no such restrictions. They're sitting safe, thousands of miles away. We've seen this contrasting approach in the Quad as well. India has been reluctant to give the Quad a military color. Yes, there are joint exercises, but at its heart, the Quad is non-military. And don't get me wrong, India very much sees China as a growing threat. The only difference is in the approach. Will Joe Biden understand that? As things stand today, he may not really have a choice. At this stage, Biden cannot afford to antagonize India. So his only option is to play along. Having said that, he will be expecting something positive. In fact, let me walk you through some recent events. South Korea's president visited Washington in the month of April. And then last week, a US nuclear submarine docked in Korea. The Filipino president was also here in the US. He then granted the Americans access to multiple military bases. Last month, Antony Blinken traveled to Papua New Guinea. Biden was supposed to go, but he pulled out at the last moment. So Blinken went. Either way, the Americans got something out of Papua New Guinea. Unimpeded access to bases in Papua New Guinea. Now, do you see the trend here? The US has been busy in the Indo-Pacific. They've gotten what they wanted from these countries, from South Korea, from the Philippines, from Papua New Guinea. So will India be next? Well, Biden is certainly dangling the carrot. We mentioned the jet engines and the drones. That's part of a large US project to pump money and to pump technology into India. But what does America want in return? Probably a second front in the conflict against China. It's purely a self-serving policy. And how should India respond? Well, with some self-service of its own. Challenging China militarily does not make sense at this point. Neither does joining the US camp. Prime Minister Modi has repeatedly emphasized on strategic autonomy. On a multipolar world, he wants to challenge China, but on his own terms. So it's up to Biden to dehyphenate things, to see India as a partner, not a...
With us right now. सर, हमारे साथ जुड़ने के लिए धन्यवाद. इस फिल्म के रिसेप्शन के बारे में आप हमें और क्या बता सकते हैं काठमांडू और नेपाल के अंदर?
देखिए, काठमांडू के जो मेयर हैं, उन्होंने फिल्म रिलीज होने से एक दिन पहले ही ये कहा था कि यदि इस फिल्म का जो डायलॉग है जिसमें ये कहा गया है कि किसी भी भारत की बेटी के साथ इस तरह का व्यवहार न करे, इस तरह का एक डायलॉग है उसमें, इनका कहना है कि सीता जो जानकी का रोल है, वो जानकी सीता माता को दिखाया गया है और उनका जन्म जनकपुर में हुआ था। वो जनकपुर की थी और जनकपुर नेपाल का हिस्सा है, इसलिए उसको भारत की बेटी कैसे कहा गया है, तो इस वजह से यहाँ पे विरोध हो रहा है। हालांकि फिल्म में जो वो डायलॉग है वो किसी और कंटेक्स्ट में कहा गया है, इस तरह की कोई आपत्तिजनक बात नहीं और सीता को खास टारगेट करके भी नहीं कहा गया है, लेकिन यहाँ पे एक अलग तरह का ही राष्ट्रवाद चलता है, भारत विरोधी राष्ट्रवाद जो है नेपाल में चलता है। तो इस वजह से फिल्म सेंसर बोर्ड जो नेपाल का है उसने वो भारत शब्द को म्यूट करके यहाँ दिखाने के लिए परमिशन दे दिया था।
The row over the Prabhas star film Adipurush continues to escalate.
One of India's strengths, as we mentioned, is its diaspora. Indian Americans make up more than 1% of the US population. That's over 4 million people. Seems like a small number, but its influence should not be underestimated because this is a very important segment of the American society. Socially, economically, and increasingly politically. And the White House knows this. As Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi lands in Washington, D.C., Indians in America will be keenly watching and participating in the events. What does this visit mean for them? What are their expectations? We spoke to some members of the Indian community in Washington, D.C. to bring you this ground report. When Prime Minister Modi met President Biden last month, the American leader had a complaint. He said Modi was too popular. You may remember this exchange in Japan. Biden told Modi he was making preparations for a grand reception in Washington and he'd run out of tickets a month before the event, because the Indian leader was too popular. That popularity was on display again. On Sunday, unity marches were held in 20 American cities. Members of the Indian diaspora showed up in large numbers. It was their way to welcome the Indian Prime Minister. We caught up with some of them in Washington, D.C. We're at the Washington Memorial where the Indian-American community has gathered to conduct a unity march to welcome Prime Minister Modi. Such marches are being held in at least 20 cities across the United States. And this is the community's way of welcoming the Indian Prime Minister. This is a 4 million strong community we're talking about. They form about 1% of the US population, and as a congressman recently pointed out, they pay 6% of the taxes in America. This is a very constructive community that the Prime Minister has engaged with. He's known for his engagements with the diaspora across the world, and in a way he started this tradition here in the United States with his event, the mega event that he held in 2014 at New York's Madison Square Gardens. That was in 2014 when Modi visited the US for the first time as Prime Minister. 19,000 people turned up to see him. The crowd waved and chanted his name. The Prime Minister's face was beamed on a giant screen, even painted on canvas live. In the years since, the engagement with the diaspora has continued, and the support base seems to have grown.
भव्य होने, विशाल होने, ये टेक्सास के स्वभाव में है.
In 2019, Modi addressed an even bigger rally in Houston. It was called the Howdy Modi event. 50,000 people attended, including then US President Donald Trump. This week will be his 8th visit as Prime Minister. He'll address the US Congress for the second time, the only Indian Prime Minister to be invited for a joint sitting twice. For the diaspora, it's a matter of pride.
Modi Saab and Biden together, we hope that the friendship lasts a very long time and we bring peace to the world solutions, and the two great leaders meeting is a very, very good thing.
Our Indian diaspora already benefited. Our students especially, a long waiting green card, we got some relief in green card.
But with a large fan base comes the weight of expectations too. The Indian diaspora is keenly watching this trip. Their expectations have grown with their support. They look to the Prime Minister to address their concerns, to promote Indian interests in America, and to strengthen their bond with India.
So heartening to see so much enthusiasm and just energy. You feel it around. And
I'd say fantastic enthusiasm, and it's a great participation from a different part of India. And it was great to see how people are so galvanizing this march for a peace, and hope all this partnership, India and US partnership, can bring up a great solution for a globally peace.
The US says this visit is a transformative one. Washington wants a deeper relationship with New Delhi, and a key factor in that will be these people. Their support can propel the India-US relationship. The United States became a democracy in the 1700s, one of the world's oldest democracies. India joined the club almost 200 years later. But India made long strides. Today it is the world's largest democracy and a thriving, robust force. New Delhi and Washington are more than 12,000 kilometers apart, but they have more in common than you would imagine. Today we'll explore that. From the National Mall in Washington, D.C. and the Central Vista in New Delhi, how two vibrant seats of democracy are linked by a single thread: the ability to evolve and represent their nation. Our next report brings you the tale of the two capitals. Behind me is the US Capitol building. It is part of what is called the front yard of America, the National Mall, home to the most iconic buildings in the country. Also the seat of the US Congress. The entire expanse is a reflection of a confident country. But how was it born? I have a story to tell you. A tale of two capitals, Washington, D.C. and New Delhi. One symbolizes the world's oldest democracy, the other is home to the world's largest democracy. Both capitals are separated by distance, but united by shared values and some history. Our story begins in Washington, D.C. The year was 1775, the US Revolution had just ended, and the Americans wanted to create a new identity for themselves, something that breaks away from their past of the British colonial rule. George Washington was the president, and he had a plan. He picked the land himself. He passed something called the Resident Act that helped create the US Capitol and the President's House, which is the seat of the US government. And for this, he handpicked a civil engineer. It was this man, Pierre Charles L'Enfant. He designed the first plans for the city of Washington, D.C., inspired by the Champs-Élysées in Paris. He visualized Washington from scratch, a grand city with wide avenues, public squares, and buildings that inspire, within a district of hills, forests, and greenery. What L'Enfant did not know then was this. His vision would inspire another democracy over 200 years later. India, yet another democracy emerging from the shadow of its colonial past. A few years back, India launched a major project, the Central Vista Project, an attempt to decolonize India's capital. When Edward Lutyens and Herbert Baker built New Delhi, they too were inspired by L'Enfant's designs. But the old Central Vista was made to serve the British. The India of the 21st century needed an upgrade. The new Central Vista aims to represent a new India with a brand new parliament building and a central secretariat to house all ministries. Also a revamped boulevard now called the Kartavya Path, or the Path of Duty. This is India's new Central Vista, and its similarities with the National Mall in Washington are striking. Both are iconic spaces, featuring grand and expansive buildings, imbued with deep symbolism. Each monument on the National Mall represents a part of America's history. In New Delhi, the India Gate and the National War Memorial evoke a sense of national pride. And the new parliament represents the rich tradition of democracy in India. This was a radical change for India, much debated, as most decisions are in a robust democracy. But such changes are part of the story for Washington's National Mall. It has undergone many such transformations. It has been rebuilt, burned, extended, and restored many times. The architectural revamp did not alter the core of America's democratic foundations. India's Central Vista project is no different. It's an attempt to revamp the democratic spaces of a confident country, a country that sees itself as a lot more than a former British colony. And it is proof that democracies need to evolve. Whether it be the National Mall behind me or the Central Vista in New Delhi, they show that democracies need to be in tune with the times to truly reflect the countries they represent. Let's come back to the visit. Here in Washington, D.C., you feel like the US is romancing Narendra Modi. A state visit, a lavish dinner, a throng of people, all of it makes for a great event and headlines. But that is only the highlight reel. There's a long backstory too, and like all love stories, this too had its twists and turns. Let me start with a picture. This is from the year 1994, where a much younger Narendra Modi stands outside the White House. He'd been invited by the American Council of Young Political Leaders. It's a non-profit organization. Clad in a simple cotton kurta, he stands along with some other political leaders, probably oblivious of how his America story will unfold. About a decade later, that story takes an unexpected turn. Modi's visa is revoked in the year 2005. He's banned from entering the United States of America. Why? Over the Gujarat riots of 2002. Where he was acquitted by Indian courts, but held guilty by the Americans. Like all things, this too passed. Within the next decade, things began to change and change dramatically for Narendra Modi. His political star rose, as did his profile on the world stage. You could say Modi's rags to riches story mirrors the phenomenal rise of India. It is now the world's fastest growing major economy, a digital powerhouse, the most populous nation, and the largest democracy. the Modi story, took a turn in the year 2014. He led his party, the Bharatiya Janata Party, to a landslide victory in the general election. He became the Prime Minister of India. And within a few months, this is what happened. Prime Minister Narendra Modi made his first triumphant visit to the United States. He had a private dinner with President Obama. He toured the Martin Luther King Jr. Memorial with the President. He received a rally fit for a rock star at Madison Square Garden with 19,000 cheering members of the Indian diaspora. This marks the beginning of America's budding romance with Modi, which grew with each visit over the years. But this week's visit, his 8th, could be historic and path-breaking because this is his first state visit to the US. He's only the 3rd Indian leader to do so, to come on a state visit to America. During his tenure of 9 years, this is the 12th time Modi will address the legislature in a foreign country. This is the highest number of times for any Indian Prime Minister till date, much higher than what his predecessors achieved during their respective tenures. Dr. Manmohan Singh addressed foreign legislatures 7 times in his 10-year tenure. Indira Gandhi 4 times, Nehru thrice, Rajiv Gandhi and Atal Bihari Vajpayee twice, and former Prime Ministers like Morarji Desai and Prime Minister P.V. Narasimha Rao only once. And specifically talking about addressing the US legislature, former Prime Ministers have done so too, including Nehru, Rajiv Gandhi, P.V. Narasimha Rao, Atal Bihari Vajpayee and Manmohan Singh. But Prime Minister Modi will become the only Indian PM to address the US Congress for the 2nd time. And this is testimony not only of Narendra Modi's rising influence, but also of India's growing stature on the world stage. Modi has single-handedly changed the political landscape of India. There is unwavering determination towards progress, with development as a key driver. So it's no surprise that America is going all out to partner with India. And only a decade ago, few anticipated that Modi would become such an ardent champion of stronger ties with the United States, that he would go on from being persona non grata to Prime Minister and America's state guest. At the core of India's engagements with the world is the idea of multi-alignment, engaging with different partners, maintaining strategic autonomy, not being boxed in any camp or alliance, and building a multipolar world. India is using its G20 presidency to further this agenda. India is pushing for what you could call a G21, a group that also has the African Union as a member. New Delhi has endorsed Africa's bid for membership. Now remember, the G20, a group of 20, is an international forum. It has 19 countries and the EU, the European Union. And since the EU is already a part of the G20, another grouping like the African Union won't be unique. But its inclusion would be significant and timely. You see, for years, countries have complained about the G20, calling it a private club with no clear path to membership. Now, the Indian Prime Minister has made an appeal for Africa to make the group more inclusive and representative of the world. Here's a report.
The G20, a grouping that describes itself as the primary venue for international economic and financial cooperation. It's an exclusive grouping that makes decisions affecting the world, but it doesn't really allow the world to take part. Since it was conceived in 1999, the group's composition hasn't changed, even though the world has. The G20 has never inducted a new member. It has permanent guests like Spain, ASEAN and the African Union, but so far the G20 hasn't given anyone membership. Now that could change thanks to India. Prime Minister Narendra Modi has written to the fellow G20 members. India wants to expand the G20 in the upcoming summit in New Delhi this September by inducting the African Union. The AU is a grouping of 55 African states. It represents about 1.4 billion people and around 10% of the world's economy. You would think that a grouping of this size would be front and center at any global forum, but that's not the reality. The AU has marginal representation at the G20. Only one AU country is a permanent member of the group, that's South Africa. The rest of the AU countries are represented by the African Union delegate, who is a permanent guest, not a member. There's also representation from the African Union's Economic Development Program, the New Partnership for Africa's Development, or NEPAD. This organization too is a permanent guest at the G20. This year, it's being represented by Egypt. So, to recap, 1.4 billion people and a tenth of the world's economy is represented by one permanent member and two guests. Let's compare this to the European representation. The EU is a member of G20, and there are 5 European countries who are members in their own capacity: Germany, France, Italy, Turkey, and the UK. Spain is also a permanent guest to the G20. So, 6 permanent seats and 1 guest represent Europe, a region with half of Africa's population. That does seem ridiculous, and the world has been waking up to this of late. Last year, Indonesia proposed the AU's membership to the G20 ahead of November's summit in Bali. Indonesia was the chair of the G20 last year. During the Bali summit, French President Emmanuel Macron backed the AU. AU membership was endorsed by China and lobbied for by South Africa. But what came of it? Nothing. There was no mention of the AU's membership in the G20 declaration after the Bali summit. So, does that mean that India's endorsement won't move the needle either? We have to wait for the summit to know for sure, but there is one crucial difference. The AU has 2 new powerful allies this time around. There's of course the hosts, India, and then there's also the US. Last December, days after the Bali summit, US President Joe Biden gave his nod to AU membership.
And today I'm also calling for the African Union to join the G20 as a permanent member of the G20.
Biden said this during a US-Africa summit in Washington. Was Biden's declaration substantial or just sweet nothings? We're likely to find out in September. India has already put its endorsement in writing. Will others follow its lead? We'll keep you updated as this story develops.
Meanwhile, away from all the diplomacy and global power play, a Bollywood film is making a splash. Not in a way that its makers would like it to, but that's how it is. I'm talking about Adipurush, a film inspired by Ramayana. Adipurush has been in the middle of controversy from the word go. And the latest one came from Nepal, India's neighbor. 2 Nepalese cities, including the capital city of Kathmandu, have released fresh orders. They've banned the screening of all Bollywood films in their cinemas, and Adipurush has been banned across Nepal. So what is this controversy about? And why has it escalated? Our next report tells you.
This is Adipurush, an Indian Hindi film, inspired by the Hindu epic Ramayana. It depicts the victory of the Hindu god Ram over the demon king Ravana, after the latter kidnaps his wife Sita, who is the female protagonist of the Ramayana. Now, one thing is important to remember here. Nepal, the landlocked South Asian country, prides itself on its connection to Sita, who is believed to hail from Janakpur in Nepal, where her father, King Janak, had his kingdom. And because of her roots, Sita is also known as Janki, meaning the daughter of Janak. And this is what Sita is called in Adipurush as well. Her character's name is Janki in the movie. Even so, a dialogue refers to her as the daughter of India. And this has been the root of a controversy in Nepal, especially as Hindus make up about 80% of the country's population. So initially Kathmandu, the Nepalese capital, issued directives saying that Bollywood films will not be screened in the city until this quote-unquote objectionable line is deleted from the movie. And this protest is being spearheaded by this man, Balendra Shah. He's the mayor of Kathmandu. Some 3 days ago, he had given an ultimatum to the makers of Adipurush, demanding that the controversial dialogue be deleted. He called it misleading. But when the desired change wasn't made, he said, "Defense of Nepal's sovereignty, independence and self-respect is the first duty of all Nepalese governments, non-governmental organizations and Nepalese citizens." Then, Shah proceeded to halt the release of all Bollywood movies. But this anger against Adipurush has spread like wildfire in the country. It began with Kathmandu, and by today morning, Pokhara had followed suit. Now, both the cities have banned Indian Hindi movies. And across the nation, Adipurush screenings have been barred, including in Dharan, Itahari, Janakpur, Dhangadi and Chitwan. But Adipurush's fight against controversy is even bigger in its home country, India. Now, Adipurush is one of the most expensive movies to be made in India. It's also mired in controversy. The film started making headlines months ago when its trailer was released. Viewers mocked cartoon-like graphics and drew similarities to Western shows like Game of Thrones. The depiction of Ramayana's characters in the movie, especially the portrayal of Hanuman, faced the ire of critics. And Adipurush kicked off a political storm where, across the ideological spectrum, many leaders came forward to protest the film. There were reports of sporadic protests against the movie. But now, anger is crossing national boundaries onto Nepal, adding to a list of disputes between the two countries, like the unresolved Kalapani territorial dispute or the Akhand Bharat mural in the new Parliament of India, which was criticized by Nepalese leaders. And now Nepal's ties with India may be further strained because of a movie that is making waves not only in India but also abroad, just not in the manner one would expect.
Now to the war in Ukraine. The fighting has intensified and there are reports of heavy casualties. This is the fallout of Ukraine's much talked about counter-offensive. It's been on for about 2 weeks now. Kiev claims 8 villages have been liberated from Russian occupation. These are primarily in 2 directions, the eastern Donetsk region and the southern Zaporizhia. Ukraine says it's slowly but steadily making progress. But Russia seems to have dug its heels in. Moscow says the Ukrainians are suffering heavy casualties as they try to make their way forward. Here's the latest.
Today, on the 18th of June, the forces of 128 Assault Brigade and the 2nd Separate Rifle Battalion chased out the Russians. The Russians ran away, leaving equipment and ammunition. Glory to Ukraine.
Ukraine's military released this video on social media yesterday. The troops claim to have liberated a village from Russian control. The troops are waving the yellow and blue flag and shouting "Glory to Ukraine." But the celebrations could have been premature. The village's name, Piatikatki, roughly translates to 5 houses. It's quite small, and it may not even be in Ukraine's hands. While a Russian official acknowledged that Piatikatki village has been retaken by Ukraine, but the official also claimed that Kyiv's troops were later pushed out of the village. Russia says the village is now in a grey area of control. And this disputed liberation reportedly came at a high price. Russian military bloggers say that both Ukraine and Russia suffered heavy losses around the village, both in terms of soldiers and equipment. Moscow keeps announcing Ukrainian casualty numbers.
Over 200 Ukrainian servicemen, 33 tanks, 30 infantry fighting vehicles and 35 armored fighting vehicles were destroyed in the course of hostilities in the Zaporizhia direction alone in a day.
Russia maintains that Ukraine's counter-offensive is faltering. It doesn't talk much about its own losses, though. The British Defence Ministry has been monitoring the war. It says both countries are suffering high casualties. It also says that Ukraine's gains have been small. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky himself acknowledged the difficulties his troops are facing, especially around Zaporizhia.
It is high time to express our gratitude to all our warriors, to those who have distinguished themselves this week. The Tavria direction is the most brutal one.
The word Tavria refers to the southern front. Zelensky called it brutal. But despite the brutality, he doesn't seem disheartened. He even issued a warning to Russia.
Russia will lose the captured territories. There is no and will be no alternative to our steps towards deoccupation. Our troops are advancing, position by position, step by step. We are moving forward.
This means the war is about to enter another prolonged, deadly phase. No matter the cost, Zelensky seems determined to go through with the counteroffensive. A lot of people on both sides will end up losing their lives, and there might not be many pieces left to pick up. Despite this, Ukraine is already planning its recovery. It wants a green Marshall Plan to rebuild its economy. This is a reference to the aftermath of World War II. Under the original Marshall Plan, the US transferred billions to Western Europe to help it rebuild. Ukraine wants a new green version of that. Green how? Kyiv plans to rebuild its destroyed industries in a sustainable manner. The focus is on steel. Ukraine says its destroyed steel plants will be rebuilt and powered by renewable energy. As part of this Green Marshall Plan, Kyiv has asked for $40 billion. This request will be debated in London on Wednesday. Ukraine and Britain are co-hosting a two-day meeting there. But any decision on this will most likely come into effect only after the war is over. And $40 billion is just an initial request. The World Bank estimates that Ukraine's reconstruction will cost $411 billion. So it's a long road ahead for Ukraine. And the first step to rebuilding is the toughest one. The war has to end.
And now it's time for Vantage Shots, images that tell the story. Indonesia and SpaceX have launched a telecommunications satellite. This project is worth over $500 million. It aims to provide internet access to remote corners of Indonesia. In the United States, a huge funnel cloud formed over a town in Oklahoma amid tornado warnings. We'll show you a time-lapse video. In Germany, a Spanish motorcycle racer crashed for the 5th time during a warm-up race. And finally, what makes the 19th of June significant? We're taking you back in history. In 1865, Texas, it's a state in America, on this day, a group of enslaved African Americans learned that they were free from slavery. Their president was Abraham Lincoln. Over 2 years back, he had signed a landmark law. It's called the Emancipation Proclamation. It was meant to free all the slaves. This day is also called Juneteenth. It's a federal holiday here in the US. We're leaving you with this. Thank you for watching. We'll see you tomorrow from Washington, D.C.
Pitching downrange.
That incredible view means that Falcon 9 has successfully lifted off from Pad 3. And right now we are throttling down here from Pad 2. In effect on your screen, the two are drifting away from our stage 2.
अब ये तो पहली बात तो ये है कि जो सेंसर बोर्ड उसे देखना चाहिए था कि इस प्रकार से जो हमारे महापुरुष हैं, जो हमारे आराध्य हैं, उसके मुख से इस प्रकार के शब्दों का बुलवाना कोई उचित बात है? ऐसे लोगों के खिलाफ तो कार्रवाई होनी चाहिए।
इस पर टिप्पणी में पढ़ना नहीं चाहता था क्योंकि इस तरह की फिल्मों के बारे में मेरा स्पष्ट मत है कि ये फिल्में एजेंडा के तहत बनाई जाती हैं। अब अगर उसमें आपने जिन ईश्वर के प्रति लोगों की आस्था एक बड़े वर्ग की, उनकी जुबान आपने टपोरियों वाली जुबान कर दी, ये तो किसी के मतलब मैं समझता हूं कि किसी के जहन में उतरेगा नहीं। आप कहीं ना कहीं ये तो साबित होता है ना कि आपको लगा मैं कुछ भी कर जाऊंगा, कुछ नहीं होगा मेरा, क्योंकि एक तरह का सैंक्शन आपको है। आपने जिन जिन लोगों को धन्यवाद दिया है फिल्म में, उसमें सारे मैं देख रहा था बीजेपी के चीफ मिनिस्टर या डिप्टी चीफ मिनिस्टर।
आदि पुरुष इस फिल्म के विषय में जो अभी र्यूमर है, जो पब्लिक ने जिन्होंने देखा है, जो रिव्यू आ रहे हैं, वो अच्छे नहीं हैं। मुझे लगता है कि कहीं ना कहीं हिंदू जनमानस को उनके संवादों से ठेस पहुंची है। और इसके पहले भी ये विषय जब आया था, जब ट्रेलर आया था इसका, तब भी मैंने ये कहा था कि इसमें किसी भी फिल्म को उसका विरोध हम तुरंत नहीं करते हैं। हम उस फिल्म को देखेंगे तब उसका विरोध हम करेंगे। लेकिन इस समय जो कुछ भी हम सुनने को हमें मिल रहा है वो ठीक नहीं है, और निश्चित तौर पर आदिपुरुष फिल्म ने हिंदू जनमानस के कहीं न कहीं मनों को ठेस पहुंचाई है।
Now there's breaking news coming in. We're learning that SP Chief Akhilesh Yadav has waded into the Adipurush controversy, saying, and I quote, "Those who are playing with the faith of the people by making arbitrary films with an agenda, with the money of political masters, their political character certificate should be checked before giving the certificate of the censor board. Has the censor board become Dhritarashtra?" Now, again, multiple statements. There's been a lot of controversy over the film Adipurush, specifically when it comes to the depiction of Sita. Remember, this film is based on the Ramayana, loosely based, of course. Now, this film is not being touted as a documentary. It is a work of fiction, but there still continues to be controversy over the depiction of the characters in the film. There have been multiple reactions from opposition leaders as well. We're crossing over to CNN News 18 senior editor Palki Sharma to tell us more about the controversy. Pallavi, so right now the breaking input that we have is a reaction from the SP chief.
Yes.
Hello and welcome to the late night edition with me, Ayushman Singh Jamwal. Breaking news coming in where Prime Minister Modi has given his first reaction for his major visit to the United States. The Prime Minister took to Twitter and said that people from all walks of life, including members of Congress, thought leaders and others have been sharing their enthusiasm on my upcoming US visit. I thank them for their kind words. Such diverse support underlines the depth of India-US ties. That's the piece of breaking news that's coming in. That is the message coming from Prime Minister Narendra Modi ahead of his visit to the United States. I'm joined by my colleague Palki Sharma on the broadcast. Palki, so this message coming in from Prime Minister Modi setting the ground when it comes to a massive outreach to the Indian diaspora in the United States as well.
Indian diaspora, yes, and one of the most, and that's been really his hallmark, because it's not just in America, but Australia, wherever he travels, he's always reached out to the Indian diaspora and also made the point that, you know, they are our representatives, our ambassadors abroad, and their success story essentially reflects the success story of India. And this is a very, very strong statement. You're absolutely right. The Prime Minister leaves early tomorrow morning around 7:45 a.m. And this is going to be a very important trip, apart from India-US equations, but also to project India as one of the major players in the world stage. And I'm sure when he's going to be meeting the Indian diaspora there, and there are multiple events which have been planned up, that's again the point he's going to try and make clear to the world, to the Americans as well, that these are our people. Whatever their success story and their contribution to Indian economy, to the American economy or social structure has largely been a slice of India's heritage, our culture, our economy, as well as our beliefs. So in that sense, the connect between the Indian government, the connect between India, the Prime Minister, and the Indian diaspora settled there is certainly going to be reiterated by the Prime Minister.
Absolutely, and this is on point when it comes to brand Modi. Whenever it happens with those foreign visits where Prime Minister Modi goes and reaches out to the Indian diaspora. So that important outreach coming in via Twitter from Prime Minister Modi to the Indian diaspora, as well as to the US administration in the United States. But shifting focus, getting in some more news, let's listen into the latest from the MEA and the Indian diaspora.
On the first day of his arrival in Washington, D.C., on 21st, the first key engagement would be an event that is focused on skilling for future, which essentially would try to bring out the key complementarities and the objectives that both systems seek to promote and achieve in the field of skilling and capacity building. There is a deep and widespread interest in the Honorable Prime Minister's visit to the US, There is a extensive government-wide effort on both sides to enrich the relationship further by including some of the key areas of cooperation.
आज मोदी जी को सपोर्ट करने आया हूँ। आई एम वेरी हैप्पी कि मैं यहाँ पे आ पाया हूँ आज। अच्छा लगता है कि मेरे को देश से ऐसी कनेक्टिविटी फील होती है कि सब लोग यहाँ पर होते हैं। जब मोदी जी आते हैं, जब देश की प्रेजेंस यहाँ पे फील होती है, तो बहुत गर्व लगता है कि मेरा देश का मैं हिस्सा हूँ।
We are here to gather to welcome Modi ji, and we are showing our solidarity, and also on the bilateral initiative from USA and India, so the partnership in climate change.
इंडिया का लीडर जो होता है वो ऐसा होना चाहिए जो इंडिया को प्यार करता है, जिसके लिए इंडिया के दिल में आदर है, प्यार है, वही इंडिया को लीड कर सकता है. And Modi ji has that quality. Number one quality, he loves India. He does everything for India, not for anybody in particular.
And more breaking news coming in. West Bengal Chief Minister Mamata Banerjee has taken exception to Governor C.V. Ananda Bose's decision to observe Bengal Foundation Day on the 28th of June. The Chief Minister wrote to the Governor and urged him not to hold the Foundation Day of West Bengal on Tuesday. Mamata Banerjee said the program would rekindle bitter memories of crores of people in West Bengal and re-incite undesirable forces. The TMC Supremo called the decision to commemorate the Foundation Day of Bengal an ahistorical, unconstitutional and unilateral decision of the Government of India. So that's the piece of breaking news that's coming in. I'm joined by my colleague Kamalka Sengupta on the broadcast. Kamalka, so strong words coming in from the Chief Minister over the Governor's plan to host Bengal Day on the 20th of June.
Yes, absolutely. This is another episode where government and the Governor is now in the loggerheads, and both the sides have really set their guns off because like from today morning, as far as the Panchayat violence is concerned, Governor has opened up a peace room. That is an area of problem between the government and the Governor, the TMC and the Governor. Now what has happened that the State Day will be observed in the Governor's house. That's what the plan is. That's by the direction of MHA. That we know from our sources. Now, Mamata Banerjee today, they had also a telephonic conversation. And there too also Mamata Banerjee stated that there is no such day, that she has written in the letter too, there is no such day in Bengal. That is a foundation day, number one. Number two, the most important thing is Bengal has come out of a history of partition, a history of pain, a history of so many people losing their land, so many people, life and all these things. So Bengal does not want to remember how West Bengal came into being because that involves emotions, that involves pain of a lot of people. So Mamata Banerjee has written a letter to the Governor. They had spoken over the phone today in the afternoon also regarding this issue. Now tomorrow, that is 28th, is the State Day as far the Governor has decided to celebrate. So 28th is the day that he will observe as State Day. Whether Governor now goes ahead with that or not, that is to be seen. Sources from Raj Bhavan say that the program will take place as it was supposed to. But definitely, this is going to raise again this conflict, conflict between the Governor and the government.
Absolutely. Thank you, Kamalka, for getting us that piece of breaking news. So a fresh flashpoint between the West Bengal government and the Governor. Shifting focus to some more breaking news. And in a major crackdown against Hawala operations in Kerala, the ED has launched large-scale searches against Hawala operators posing as forex dealers. The dealers are suspected of sending Hawala to Gulf countries, the US and Canada. During the search operations, the ED has seized a huge amount of foreign currency as well as Indian currency in secret vaults. The search operations are taking place in 50 locations. That's the piece of breaking news that's coming in. When it comes to the crackdown on Hawala operators in the state of Kerala, what we are learning is that in this major crackdown, the ED has launched large-scale searches against Hawala operators posing as forex dealers. The dealers are suspected of sending Hawala to Gulf countries, US and Canada. The ED has seized a huge amount of foreign currency and Indian currency in secret vaults. We'll continue to track all the developments which are coming in. We're shifting focus to the controversy over the Prabhas starrer Adipurush, which continues to escalate. Hindu groups are up in arms, calling the movie an insult to their faith. From protests on the streets, Hindu groups have also stormed theatres and disrupted screenings of the controversial film. They are upset over the dialogues in the film and the depiction of the revered characters, calling the representation crass and offensive. The opposition has accused the BJP of hurting Hindu sentiments by allowing the release, citing how the movie thanks multiple BJP chief ministers for supporting it. Now, Team Adipurush has said it will amend the dialogues to protect Hindu sentiments. However, the film's co-writer, Manoj Muntashir, has asked for security from the Mumbai police, citing threats to his life.
The fact that the current depiction of Ramayana through Om Raut's Adipurush is making people talk about and remember Ramanand Sagar's Ramayana even more, which people till today really feel was the most apt representation of Tulsidas's Ramayana. How do you really feel about this entire comparison?
Well, रामायण इज़ अ थिंग जिसकी हम पूजा करते हैं, भगवान राम जिनकी हम पूजा करते हैं, आस्था है हमारी. रामानंद सागर हिमसेल्फ वाज अ वेरी बिग बिलीवर इन गॉड, स्पेशली माँ दुर्गा एंड भगवान राम. So we did it, we made it with a very honesty, and a very why.
Now, when you say why, sir, what do you think really got into the filmmakers to go ahead and do this sort of an experimentation, also putting Ramayana into perspective? Because I believe the kind of turnout that we've seen in the theatres was because people wanted to relive the old Ramayana. The makers earlier said that this is totally, a remake of Ramayana. Now they are saying it was an experimentation. Why do you think that backtracking really is happening now?
Because of the reviews the film got, one has to say something. So they're saying it now. They didn't say it earlier that this is not Ramayana or something like that. Now they're saying it. Well, that's very normal for a human being, to defend self. Very normal. But the fact is the film is based on Ramayana. The characters are the same, so they can't get away with it. What damage was done, it cannot be, you can't take it back.
Okay. Now, let's talk about cinematic liberties, sir, because that's the other argument that is also being presented. I remember there was a film, Lajja, that was based on Taslima Nasreen's book, where Madhuri Dixit's character, who plays